The holographic display flickered with the last known coordinates of the Seventh Fleet. Queen Vereshka stood motionless before it, her 4 hands clasped behind her segmented spine, her breathing apparatus cycling slower than her attendants had seen in 3 cycles. The coordinates hadn't changed in 47 hours? No distress signals? No debris fields? No survivors? Just silence where 300 warships and 40,000 of her finest soldiers had been. Majesty. The War Master's voice carried the tremor he tried to suppress. The reconnaissance probe has returned. She didn't turn. Her primary eyes remained fixed on those frozen coordinates, while her secondary eyes tracked his approach in her peripheral vision. Show me. The hologram shifted. A blue-green world rotated slowly, its single moon hanging in the black like a guardian. Earth! The humans called it Earth. Such a plain name for the graveyard of her empire's greatest armada. There is no debris, the War Master said. No energy signatures, no trace of the fleet at all. That's impossible. The statement came from General Thex, his mandibles clicking in agitation. 300 ships don't simply vanish. Vereshka finally turned. Her compound eyes caught every detail of the command chamber. The nervous flutter of the communications officer's antennae, the way the tactical staff had unconsciously moved closer together. Fear. They were all afraid. How many worlds has the fleet conquered before reaching this system, she asked. 164, Majesty, the War Master answered immediately. Every engagement was decisive. The humans were marked as primitive, fusion-based propulsion, kinetic weapons, no energy shielding, and yet our fleet is gone. The silence that followed pressed against her like physical weight. She moved to the tactical display and expanded it with a gesture. 164 conquered worlds appeared as red markers, a trail of devastation stretching across 3 sectors. Agricultural worlds, mining colonies, research stations, all had fallen within hours. The humans had watched it happen, had known the fleet was coming, and had done nothing to evacuate their outer settlements. They let us come, she said quietly. Majesty? Look at the pattern. Her primary right hand traced the path. They fortified nothing. They sent no intercepting forces. They recalled no colonial populations. They simply watched us approach their homeworld. She zoomed in on Earth's solar system, and then they made us disappear. A junior officer, barely past her molting, spoke before protocol could stop her. Perhaps they developed new technology, a weapon we haven't encountered. The War Master's head snapped toward her, but Vereshka raised a hand. Continue. The humans have a historical pattern of rapid innovation during crisis. Every probe we've sent showed incremental advancement, but if they knew we were coming, if they had time to prepare, we gave them time to watch us conquer 164 worlds. We showed them every weapon, every tactic, every weakness in our conquered enemies. His mandibles went still. We taught them how to kill us. Vereshka felt the cold truth of it settle into her thorax. The humans hadn't been passive. They'd been studying, learning, preparing, and her fleet had obliged them with a comprehensive demonstration of imperial warfare, believing that primitive eyes couldn't comprehend what they witnessed. Send the probe closer, she commanded. I want to see their world. The hologram shifted again. Earth grew larger, its continents and oceans becoming visible. Cities glittered across the night side, vast concentrations of light and activity. The day side showed green land and blue water, clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns that reminded her painfully of her own homeworld before the wars. There, the War Master highlighted a region. Unusual energy signature. Consistent with our shield technology, but the output is... He stopped, recalculating. Majesty, that can't be correct. What is it? The power output would require the entire energy production of a small star. Nothing that size should be able to generate. Every screen in the command chamber blazed with the same brilliant light, and then they all went dark. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. Report. Vereshka's voice cut through the chaos. The probe is destroyed, communications called out. Something fired from Earth's surface. The energy signature matched nothing in our databases. Travel time from surface to probe was a pause. 3.2 seconds across 40,000 kilometers. Vereshka's breathing apparatus cycled once, twice. That's not possible. The data is confirmed, Majesty. She looked at the darkened displays, at her command staff, staring at screens that no longer showed them anything useful. 3.2 seconds. Her own fleet's fastest weapons needed 20 seconds to cover that distance. Whatever the humans had developed, it made Imperial technology look primitive. Recall all forces, she said quietly. Everything within 5 sectors. I want every ship, every soldier, every resource we have positioned at the border. Majesty, surely they won't. They just destroyed our probe as a warning, she interrupted the War Master. They let us send it. And then they showed us exactly what happened to our fleet. She turned to face him fully. They're not hiding. They're hunting. The command chamber went absolutely still. Outside the viewports, the stars burned cold and indifferent. Somewhere among them, humanity was doing something that should have been impossible. And the Seventh Fleet's silence suddenly made terrible sense. The display reactivated 18 hours later. No probe this time. The humans were transmitting directly to every Imperial vessel within range. Vareshka stood alone in her private observation chamber when the message began, having ordered her staff to record everything but not to interrupt. A human appeared on screen. Male, she thought, though their species dimorphism was less pronounced than her own kind. He wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal ornamentation. His face was young, but his eyes were ancient, and when he spoke, the translation matrix rendered his words in perfect imperial formal. I am Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Government. This message is intended for Queen Vareshka of the Ixithan Empire. He paused, and his eyes seemed to look directly through the transmission, directly at her. We know you're listening. She felt her breathing apparatus catch. 164 worlds, Chen continued. We watched you conquer 164 worlds. We watched you destroy cities from orbit. We watched you harvest populations for your labor camps. We watched you strip mine colonies until nothing remained but dust. His voice never rose, never hardened, but something in his tone made her carapace tighten. We watched you come closer, and we prepared. The image shifted. The camera pulled back to show Chen standing in what appeared to be a command center, but the scale was wrong. The room stretched hundreds of meters in every direction, filled with equipment that hurt to look at. Technology that bent space around it in visible ways, that made the air shimmer with unreleased potential. You're wondering what happened to your fleet, Chen said. You've noticed that there's no debris, no distress signals, no evidence of battle. He gestured, and the hologram beside him activated. Vareshka recognized the Seventh Fleet's formation, the perfect attack pattern that had broken 100 worlds. They entered Earth's solar system with weapons active and shields raised. They were 50 million kilometers out when we fired. A single beam, impossibly narrow, impossibly bright, lancing out from Earth. It touched the lead dreadnought and kept going, passing through shields like they didn't exist, through armor like it was vapor. The dreadnought didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, every molecule converted to energy in an instant too brief to measure. Directed zero-point energy extraction, Chen explained, as if discussing weather. We collapsed the quantum foam in a targeted area, converting matter directly to usable power. The energy released from your flagship powered the next shot, and the next, and the next. The hologram showed it, a cascade of annihilation spreading through the fleet, each ship's destruction fueling the weapon that killed the next. Your entire fleet was gone in 4.7 minutes. We used the energy to charge our defensive systems. She activated the support field around her viewing platform, barely managing to keep standing. You expected us to be primitive, Chen continued. You saw our fusion drives and kinetic weapons and assumed we were centuries behind you, but you misunderstood something fundamental about humanity. He leaned forward slightly. We don't innovate slowly. We don't develop technology through careful, measured progress. We explode forward when threatened, and you gave us the greatest threat we've ever faced. The hologram shifted again, showing a timeline. Research stations lighting up across Earth and its colonies, universities, military facilities, private corporations, all working in unprecedented cooperation. The timeline accelerated, showing breakthrough after breakthrough, each building on the last. You gave us 3 years, Chen said, from the time we detected your fleet to the time it arrived at our system. 3 years to watch you conquer. 3 years to study your tactics. 3 years to build something you couldn't imagine. His expression didn't change, but his voice dropped. 3 years to become what we needed to be to survive. The transmission can't be interactive. As if hearing her, Chen smiled slightly. You're wondering if we can hear you. We can't. But I know what you're thinking because I would think the same thing in your position. You're considering your options, wondering if you can negotiate, if you can retreat beyond our reach. if you can prepare a defense.
The camera followed him as he walked to a viewport.
Beyond it, Earth hung in space, serene and beautiful and utterly terrifying. Let me be clear about something, Queen Vereshka. We didn't want this. We're not a warlike species. We would have welcomed peaceful contact. We would have traded shared knowledge, built something together. He turned back to face the camera. But you didn't give us that choice. You came as conquerors. You showed us what you do to worlds that can't defend themselves. The hologram activated again. This time it showed a map of Imperial space. 3 sectors, hundreds of systems, thousands of worlds. As Vereshka watched, red markers began appearing. Not at the borders. Deep inside Imperial territory, at strategic points she recognized as fleet anchorages, shipyards, command centers. These are human ships, Chen said quietly. We launched them 6 months ago, while your fleet was still conquering World 143. They've been traveling through what you call unreal space. We had to invent the name since our translation of your dimensional physics was imperfect. They're faster than anything you have, harder to detect, and they carry the same weapon that destroyed your fleet. Every marker pulsed in unison, a coordinated heartbeat across 3 sectors. You have 72 hours, Chen said. At the end of that time, if we haven't received an unconditional surrender, we will begin sterilizing Imperial worlds. Not conquering, we don't want your empire. We'll simply remove your ability to threaten anyone ever again. He paused. 164 worlds, Queen Vereshka. You taught us that number. We'll match it exactly, and then we'll stop. We'll leave you with enough to survive, to rebuild, to remember why you should have chosen peace. The transmission flickered. Chen's image began to fade, but his voice remained clear. We became monsters to fight monsters. We'll live with that burden. But we'll make sure you live too. Humbled, contained, and never again able to do what you did to those 164 worlds. His eyes locked on the camera one final time. 72 hours. Choose wisely. Vereshka stood in silence for a long time. Outside her viewport, the fleet she'd recalled was gathering. 3,000 ships, the largest concentration of Imperial power in 5 generations. Enough to conquer a sector. Enough to break any known defense. Not enough to stop what the humans had become. Her communication implant activated. The War Master's voice was carefully neutral. Majesty, the Grand Assembly is convening. They're demanding a response. Tell them we surrender, she said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, Majesty, you heard me, War Master. We surrender. Unconditionally. But the fleet, our forces, we have the strength to... To what? Vereshka turned from the viewport. To attack a species that can convert matter to energy at will? That can cross sectors in months? That destroyed our finest fleet in less than 5 minutes? She felt old suddenly, far older than her 140 cycles. They're not bluffing, War Master. They showed us exactly what they're capable of, and then they gave us a choice. We take it. The Assembly won't agree. Then they'll watch 164 worlds die, while their pride costs them everything. Her voice hardened. I won't let that happen. Draft the surrender. Complete. We accept any terms they demand. She cut the connection and looked back at the dark screen where Chen's face had been. The humans had done something her species never managed. They'd taken the worst the galaxy could throw at them and not only survived but transcended. They'd become something new in the crucible of existential threat. And they'd stayed human enough to offer mercy when they could have simply killed. The surrender took 36 hours to formalize. The Grand Assembly fought her every moment, demanding alternatives, suggesting strategies, insisting that the Imperial fleet could find a weakness in human defenses. Vereshka let them talk. She knew desperation when she heard it, and she knew it wouldn't change reality. When the document was finally ready, she transmitted it herself. No intermediaries, no ceremony. Just a simple acknowledgement that the Ixotan Empire accepted unconditional surrender to the United Earth government and would comply with any terms humanity deemed necessary. The response came 4 hours later. Secretary General Chen again, but this time flanked by others, humans of different ages and appearances, all wearing the same simple uniforms. The translation matrix identified them as representatives from Earth's major political bodies, military commands, and civilian oversight committees. They weren't leaving this to one person. Queen Vereshka, Chen began, we accept your surrender. The following terms are non-negotiable. Vereshka read through it, her breathing apparatus cycling faster as she processed the implications. All Imperial forces would withdraw to designated home sectors immediately. No ship larger than a system defense corvette would be permitted outside Imperial core worlds. All conquered populations would be freed and provided transport back to their homeworlds or to new colonies of their choosing, paid for by Imperial resources. The Empire would submit to oversight by an international coalition including humans and former Imperial subjects. Any research into weapons capable of planetary destruction would cease immediately. And at the bottom, the Ixithan Empire will provide full historical records of all conquests, including tactical data, strategic planning, and personal accounts from all levels of command. These records will be made public across all species as a reminder of what happened and why it must never happen again. Vereshka felt the weight of it. They weren't just ending her empire's expansion. They were turning it into a cautionary tale, a permanent monument to the cost of aggressive war. These terms will reduce the Empire to a fraction of its current size and influence, she said aloud, though she knew the transmission wasn't interactive. As if anticipating her words, Chen continued, "We understand these terms are harsh. They're meant to be, but notice what they're not. We're not demanding executions. We're not taking hostages. We're not installing puppet governments or extracting tribute. We're simply ensuring you can't do this again." One of the other humans stepped forward, an older woman with gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much war. "Your species will survive, Queen Vereshka. Your culture will continue. Your people will live. We could have demanded total annihilation. The families of the billions you killed would have every right to demand it. We're offering you something better than you offered any of those 164 worlds." Chen took over again. "You have 2 weeks to begin compliance. Our ships will maintain their positions until we confirm full withdrawal. Any deviation from these terms, any attempt to hide military assets or research, will result in immediate consequences." His expression softened slightly. "We don't want to destroy you. We want to make sure you never destroy anyone else." The transmission ended. Vereshka stood in her observation chamber looking out at the fleet that had been assembled to defend the Empire. 3,000 ships representing the might of a civilization that had conquered across 3 sectors. All of it useless against a species that had learned to weaponize the fundamental forces of reality itself. The War Master entered without announcement, a breach of protocol she didn't have the energy to address. The fleet commanders are refusing to stand down. She'd expected this. Tell them they have 2 choices. Comply with the surrender, or watch me broadcast the human transmission to every ship in the fleet. She turned to face him. Once they see what actually happened to the 7th Fleet, they'll understand. You would undermine military morale during a crisis. What crisis? Vereshka gestured to the viewport. The war is over. We lost. The only question now is whether we lose with dignity, or whether we force the humans to demonstrate their capabilities again. She moved closer to him. How many worlds would you sacrifice to preserve the illusion of Imperial strength? The War Master's mandibles clicked in agitation, but he didn't answer. Exactly, she said. Now carry out your orders. The withdrawal took 3 months. Vereshka watched it happen from her throne room, surrounded by advisors who grew quieter each day as the true scope of their defeat became clear. Fleet after fleet returned to Imperial core worlds, carrying troops who'd expected to fight and instead found themselves retreating without firing a shot. Ships that had enforced Imperial will across conquered sectors limped home to be decommissioned or stripped down to meet the new treaty limits. The freed populations were harder to watch. Vereshka forced herself to see it anyway. Entire species celebrating liberation, worlds coming back to life after years of Imperial occupation. The humans had deployed medical ships, food supplies, reconstruction materials. They weren't just ending the occupation, they were actively healing the damage the Empire had done. Reports came in of human diplomats meeting with former subject species, discussing trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. A new alliance was forming, built on voluntary cooperation rather than conquest. The Empire had created it, not through strength, but through cruelty. Every species that had suffered under Imperial rule now had a common enemy and a common savior. We're going to be isolated, the War Master said during one briefing. He'd aged in the past months, his carapace dulling, his movements slowing. Every species in 3 sectors will remember what we did. They'll never trade with us, never ally with us. We'll be alone. Good, Vereshka said quietly. He looked at her sharply. Asti, we deserve isolation. We deserve to be remembered for what we did. She gestured to the reports scattered across her workstation. The humans are right to make our history public. Future generations of Ixithan should know the price of conquest. They should carry the shame we earned. You speak of destroying our cultural legacy. I speak of honesty. She stood, her joints aching from hours of sitting. Our legacy is 164 conquered worlds and billions of dead. That's what we built. That's what we were. She moved to the window, looking down at the capital city below. Perhaps isolation will teach us to become something better. The personal message from Secretary General Chen arrived a week later, marked for her eyes only. She opened it in her private chambers, half expecting another list of demands or warnings. Instead, she found something unexpected. Queen Vereshka, the message began. I wanted to send this personally, away from official channels. What I'm about to say represents my own views, not necessarily those of my government or humanity as a whole. He stood in what looked like a garden, green plants and flowing water visible behind him. He looked tired. I've been thinking about how this must feel from your perspective. The shock of losing everything your empire built. The humiliation of surrender. The knowledge that your species will be remembered as aggressors. He paused. I want you to know that I understand those feelings. Humanity has been in similar positions throughout our history, defeated, occupied, forced to confront our own capacity for cruelty. We have a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The shame you're feeling now, the isolation you're facing, they'll become part of your cultural DNA, and maybe that's good. Maybe that's how civilizations grow. Vereshka found herself sitting as well, drawn in by his words despite herself. Here's what I hope happens, Chen continued. I hope that 200 years from now, young Ixathan are studying this period and asking how their ancestors could have done such terrible things. I hope they're uncomfortable with the answer. I hope they've built something better. He looked directly into the camera. And I hope that when they reach out to the galaxy again, peacefully this time, we're wise enough to give them a chance. The message shifted to show Earth again, but from a different angle. Cities glittering in the night, but also forests and oceans, mountains and plains. A living world protected. We didn't want to become weapons, Chen said quietly. We wanted to explore the stars, to meet other species, to learn and grow together. You forced us to become something we never intended to be. We'll carry that burden forever. The knowledge that we built weapons capable of destroying worlds, that we threatened to use them, that we would have if you'd refused to surrender. Every human involved in developing those weapons has nightmares about it. We created something monstrous to fight monsters, and we can never uncreate it. The knowledge exists now. The capability exists, and we have to live with that. He stood, hands clasped behind his back. So we're both diminished by this war. You lost your empire. We lost our innocence. Maybe that's the real cost of conflict. Everyone who touches it becomes something less than they were. The image began to fade, but Chen's final words remained clear. I genuinely hope your species finds a better path, Queen Vereshka. Not for our sake. We can defend ourselves now. For yours. Because isolating yourself in shame isn't growth. It's just another form of death. The message ended. Vereshka sat in silence for a long time, processing what she'd heard. Shen had shown her mercy, yes, but also honesty. He'd acknowledged the cost on both sides without excusing what the Empire had done. And he'd offered something she hadn't expected, hope that redemption might be possible, even if it took generations. She activated her personal console and began composing a response. It took hours to get the words right, to balance humility with dignity, acknowledgement with determination. Secretary General Chen, she finally wrote, I received your personal message. I want you to know that it meant more than any official communication could. You've given me something to work toward beyond mere compliance with surrender terms, a vision of what my species might become if we choose growth over resentment. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I cannot promise that the Ixithan people will follow the path you've outlined. The shame is too fresh, the wounds too deep. Many will blame humanity for our diminishment, rather than accepting responsibility for our actions. But I can promise that I will work to preserve the truth of what happened and why. I will ensure that future generations understand not just that we were defeated, but that we deserve to be. The words felt like ripping something vital from her thorax, but they were true. You spoke of both species being diminished by this conflict. I think you're wrong about humanity. You became more than you were. You rose to meet an existential threat and surpassed it. You showed mercy when you could have chosen annihilation. You offered hope when you could have offered only justice. She felt her breathing apparatus cycle slowly. The Ixithan Empire was diminished because it deserved to be. Humanity was elevated because you chose to be better than your enemies. She signed the message with her full formal title, knowing it would be one of the last times she used it with any real authority. The Empire was already fragmenting, member species declaring independence, colonies choosing to join the new alliance forming around Earth. Within a generation, the Ixithan Empire would be nothing but a historical footnote, a cautionary tale about the price of conquest. Perhaps that was exactly what it should be. The response from Chen came 3 days later. It was brief. "Thank you for your honesty, Queen Vereshka. I hope we both live long enough to see what our species become. If we do this right, maybe they'll be better than we were." Vereshka read it twice, then stored it in her personal archive. Someday, when Ixithan historians studied this period, they would need to see this exchange. They would need to understand that even in defeat, dialogue was possible, that even former enemies could acknowledge each other's pain. She turned to her final task, preparing her abdication speech. The Grand Assembly didn't know yet, but she'd already decided. The Ixithan Empire needed new leadership, someone who hadn't overseen its expansion and collapse, someone who could guide her people through the shame and isolation towards something resembling redemption. She would step down, accept responsibility for the Empire's actions, and spend her remaining cycles ensuring that the truth of what happened would never be forgotten or minimized. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough to balance 164 conquered worlds, but it was what she could do. Outside her window, the first transport ships were arriving, carrying freed populations back to their homeworlds. She watched them go and felt the weight of uncountable lives saved, not by her choice, but by humanity's mercy. The humans had won more than a war. They had demonstrated that strength without cruelty was possible, that victory without vengeance could exist. They had shown the galaxy a different path, and Queen Vereshka, ruler of a fallen empire, found herself hoping that her species might someday have the courage to walk it.